Good morning. I've been asked to talk to you about the nuts and bolts of how to get access to the data that is in dbGaP. So part of it will be philosophical, but part of it will be very practical. First of all, I just wanted to give you a way of looking at sort of the process of actually getting data. We start with the research participants, and that really is our primary sort of foundation of respecting the research participants. And then the data is actually collected and shared through submitting investigators and submitted into a database, and in this case it's the dbGaP, which is our interface. And then what I'm going to focus on next is sort of how the data is distributed for secondary users. And it's my understanding you have three sort of venues of access to data. You have a public access mode, you have an intermediary mode, but what I'm going to be focusing on today is a controlled access.
Can you hold those microphones closer to them?
I'm getting closer to the microphone. So the basic rationale for data sharing is basically the foundation of respecting research participants. And then also, while we are respecting the research participants, it's really to enhance scientific progress and accelerate translation of genomic and other types of research into treatments, products, and procedures that will not only affect public health, but the families and individuals themselves. I think importantly, we need to also understand that unshared information represents a loss of opportunity. And so what we're trying to do is encourage data access and sharing that is unencumbered by intellectual property claims, really trying to discourage premature claims of pre-competitive information, and importantly, increase the availability of research data in general to a wider range of secondary data users. So the next slide is just talking about the people who are involved with that you're going to need to include in your application for the access to closed access data. The first person is the requester. By definition, it has to be a full-time senior faculty or staff member at an institution, and they have to be actually employed by that institution. Trainees, including postdoc students, are not considered senior staff. I only highlight this because you get a fair number of applications where postdocs are actually applying, and I think they end up feeling frustrated why they or their lab cannot get easy access to the data. The next group is collaborators, both internal to your organization as well as your external collaborators who are housed in different sort of institutions. It's important to actually include all of these investigators' names onto the application, and we do actually look for them. And that for the external collaborators, they actually need to apply for the data independently. And that's mainly so their signing official can attest to the data security of their system. The third important person in the role of getting the data is your IT director. And this is really the person at the institution that has the authority to confirm the institution's capacity to comply with the genomic data sharing policy and data security standards. And last but not least, is the institutional signing official. And this person is the legal authority for the institution who can actually attest and agree to the data use certification. So here's the application process in a nutshell. We have the requesters, the data access committee, which I'm going to be the chair of for Kids First, and the dbGaP technical team. So overall, the person's going to submit a data access request. The requester has to submit the data access request. They have to agree to the data use certification, and the signing official actually has to sign off the application. Until that happens, it never enters the data access committee system. So it turns out one of these pinch points in the system is the signing official doesn't sign the application. So I would encourage all of you who are requesting data to poke your signing official every so often if you're feeling a delay. The Data Access Committee staff will actually answer questions about access you may have regarding the application, and I would encourage you to reach out to us at kidsfirststack.nih.gov, and we'll be happy to walk you through the application process itself. And then if you happen to have technical questions, the dbGaP technical team is always available. So then that gets done, and the data access request gets assigned to me as the first stack, Kids First Stack. And then what we do a preliminary screen to make sure all of the administrative requirements have been met. And then the next one is we actually review the data access request. The data access committee is comprised of senior staff, NIH staff, who have expertise, scientific expertise, as well as ethical backgrounds around the regulations and IRB. We make a decision, and then we notify the requester of the decision, and then through dbGaP, they'll provide you instructions and a password how to get access to the data. I can confidently say we're pretty quick. I think that once we get the application, we can get it out within a week. So I would just encourage you to get the applications in. And if you have questions, if they happen to be rejected, we do give specific feedback what you need to do to modify your application. And then what we do as part of our responsibility to the research participants, we actually monitor the use to make sure that how the research that has been approved is actually done, and if there are other potential issues, we'll help you remedy those. Okay, this is busy, but I just wanted to show you what it actually looks like and what you're going to be held accountable to. So overall, requesters or investigators can use the requested data set only for the research described in their data access request. And at some levels, it seems very sort of straightforward to me, but working in the lab previously myself, I know that things creep depending on how things work out, but it's going to be really important for investigators to pay attention to this, because if they're using the data for what it's not been approved, it becomes a reportable data management incident. You agree not to distribute the data to individuals not specified in the data access request. Those are your collaborators. You agree not to attempt to contact or identify research participants, and that you adhere to best practices that ensures the data security. This is busy, but I just wanted to show you what it looks like. So the application process itself is you have to get into the dbGaP system, and this is what it looks like. And then what you need to do is you need to propose a research use statement that is consistent with the policy. Part of the policy says you can't redeposit the data in other public databases, and that the external collaborators must independently apply for data access. So I know some of you have actually gone through the system, and it may have caused you some angst, but there is sort of an art to actually drafting these data use statements. You should know that you have a 2,200 character limit, so you have to be clear, concise. And the conciseness will also, what you have to propose is your research objectives, your study design, how you plan to use the data, as well as the analysis that you're planning to do, how your proposed research is consistent with the use restrictions that you are wanting for the studies that you requested, and describe any sort of collaborations you may have. I can tell you this can be done in 2,200 characters. I can see some faces around the room. The other piece is this non-technical summary. The non-technical summary must be understandable to non-scientific communities and reflect the content contained in the research use statement. And this is really part of the expectation of the plain language that we have with the federal government. So here's an example that what we may think is really clear really is not clear. So my litmus test is, will my mother be able to understand this? And my mother will not. So I would just encourage you, as you do your applications, is to be sensitive to making the information accessible. And both the research use statement and non-technical summary will be available on the study page, so people will actually be able to read what you're proposing. So, as was alluded to earlier in the overview, is your proposed research must be consistent with the data uses of all your data sets requested. And what we often find is that people are requesting data sets that are inconsistent with what they propose. So there's two ways that the system double checks you. You choose your data sets here, and then they make you confirm your data sets. So it's a double check to make sure that the data sets, and you're aware of the data set and the data use limitations. the last part that the investigator needs to do is they confirm the data use certification. And I just basically highlighted the main points of the certification. And many of them I've already alluded to before in terms of having to use the data only that you propose in the research use statement. The data is confidential, and not to share the data. Hey, you already have the appropriate data security protection, and importantly, you will acknowledge the dbGaP in the accession number of the study. So the acknowledgement statement, and thank you, Valerie, for providing this. It's my understanding you have sort of a standardized acknowledgement statement. I think this is an important part of data sharing because I think we need to give credit where credit is due. And part of our responsibilities of the Data Access Committee is to make sure when people have their publications, we go back and look. And if they are not meeting the expectations of the acknowledgement statement, we actually go to the investigators to have an erratum put into the journal. It's important to list all the appropriate accession numbers of the data sets that you have used for your publication and describe the databases and platforms. So the last part of the application is your signing official. You have to agree to all of what I've just said. And then you send it to your signing official. So overall, this is what it looks from beginning to end. You start with your login that is based on an ERA Commons authentication. You as the requester and as well as your signing official assures that you agree to the terms of the certification. The research participant protections and scientific integrity and requester collaborations are assured by your signing official. Your signing official also agrees to protect the confidentiality and data re-identification. And there actually is real-time reporting of data security and other policy violations. And last, I just wanted to have a resource for all of you. It's sort of helpful sort of places you can get additional information. For the actual application process and questions you may have for accessing the data, I would highly encourage you to contact the Kids First Stack at the top email. There are general FAQs for using dbGaP as well as some YouTube tutorials. And then there is information about the program, as you know, for the data commons. And if you want to get into the weeds about what the data sharing policy is for genomic data sharing, that is the last link for it.